Hello, everybody, and welcome to a new episode of Effed Up Stories. I am your host, Will Pender.
And I am your co-host, Ryan Sharp.
And tonight we have a new user-submitted story, this time involving a creepy basement with a creepy pentagram that has real physical properties. Now, before we get into that, I just want to go over a couple things with you guys. Number one, yes, I'm aware we haven't had an episode for a week or two. The reason being that I was on vacation. That's actually why I uploaded 3 at a time. And I've been really busy on my vacation and busy coming off of it, so we just haven't gotten to it yet. And as well, I have a ton of your submissions that I still don't have online, and I know, fuck me, it's my fault, but I will get them online. I've just been really busy, so I still have them. Don't fret. I'm hoping to get those up on this weekend coming. And of course, if you have an effed up story of your own and want to get that into a podcast, you can do that by going to the official site, effedupstories.com. That's EFFEDUPSTORIES.com. And going to the menu, submissions, fill out the form, hit submit. I'll get it on the website, and eventually we will get it into a podcast.
And I guess on my end of things, as far as news goes, I'm getting ready to move right away here. And so things are pretty busy, pretty crazy. If I don't get back to your emails or your messages right away, I'm not ignoring you. It's just been pretty crazy right now, and it will be for the next 2 weeks, I'll say. And I don't know what kind of interruptions that's going to have with the podcast, but we're going to try and work around that if possible.
We'll try to get a couple done in bulk that we can just, and adding to that, after Ryan moves, there's a good chance I'm going to be moving. So, we're not neglecting anybody. Just a little heads up if if you don't hear from us for a couple weeks, or if we're a little late or whatever. So, that having been said, we're going to jump into this story sent in from Xander.
Jump into this deep, dark hole.
This deep, dark hole sent in by Xander. And, that is the official title for the story on the website if you want to read it. But yes, I believe he was a doctor. Let's jump into his story. Yes, that's it. Okay. So I'm just going to read it from the way that we have it here. I'm a healthcare provider at an outpatient office, and this didn't happen to me, but it is a story relayed to me from one of my patients. I don't have any reason to doubt its veracity, since he actually avoids anything paranormal themed because of this event and doesn't like hearing scary stories, much less recounting this one. So, when this guy was a little kid, he used to go over to his grandmother's to play, and anyway, he would love to, go see her. He didn't kick up a stink about having to go, but her house always had this eerie feeling that, he always picked up on. And he also had a lot of unusual experiences there that convinced him that the place was haunted. And, in one instance, for example, he was laying in bed one night when he looked up and he saw a stern black male in a military uniform move past his bedroom door. And the apparition stopped to look in at him before gliding, and that's the word he uses, gliding back down the hallway. He said he thought it looked exactly like his dad, who was actually in the military, except his dad had been overseas during this time, so it was impossible to have been his dad. And, in essence, basically what he said is that a lot of this kind of activity had happened to him in this house, but there was one room in particular, and this room was the worst. And, of course, as you would probably guess, that room was the basement. And the following is what happened to him in the basement, and is the scariest experience he had ever had in this house. So, before his grandmother even moved into this house, the house had actually been owned by members of a satanic cult, and they had used the basement to perform their rituals. And in the middle of the basement, on the floor, still was a large white circle of chalk, and it had remained there even after his grandmother moved in, so it's still there. She didn't use the basement for much except storage, and I guess she never paid mind to it. But as a kid, this guy would go down there to play a lot by himself, and he would see this thing. So one time he went down there to play, and he noticed something very odd. And in the middle of the basement, where the white circle should have been, was a deep black hole. He said the space inside the white circle was literally missing, like someone had drilled a large, perfectly round hole through the concrete and into the earth. This really surprised him. It spooked him. He was already uneasy just looking at this thing from the stairway. But being a little kid, he was curious. And so he went down and he got right up to the edge of this thing, and he just peered down into this deep, dark abyss, trying to see where it went or if there was anything inside. And he said what disturbed him the most was that the hole was so deep he couldn't see the bottom. If he could just figure out where the bottom was, he said he felt he could be less disturbed by it. He looked for some small objects to drop inside, just to test the depth of the hole. So he started with these pennies, and then these small stones, and then larger stones. And nothing he dropped into the hole would make a sound, no matter how big or how heavy these things were. And as strange as it sounds, it seemed to be bottomless. So terrified, he went upstairs and never played down there again. Now, he found out later as an adult that his grandmother now had a locked bolt on the basement door. She forbids anybody from going down there, and she apparently has had a lot of her things in storage down there before, a few of which that she's had it to, she's needed to go and retrieve, like old records and important files, but she just absolutely refuses to unlock the basement door for anything, no matter what. So this guy has, he's asked his grandmother, but she refuses to explain why. And he's even requested to go down there to get some of these things himself from the basement, or just to get some of her things for her, but she just, flat out refuses to let him go. Now, personally, and this is from the guy who submitted the story, he said he don't think locking the door necessarily made her that much safer. And this is where this gets even creepier. And that's because of this little detail here. The other odd thing that happened to this kid in the basement was an instance where a stack of boxes suddenly crashed over by themselves, causing him to run upstairs in fright. And sometime later, a similar event had happened in the upstairs closet. There was this loud crash and everything in the closet had just fallen down. And it turned out that later, they discovered there was a chute or a door inside of the closet that led down to the basement. So whatever was down in the basement still had and still has a back door through the chute from the basement to the upstairs and through that closet. And apparently sometimes it does come up. So the question, of course, remains, in a house that was already pretty thoroughly haunted, what happened that made his grandmother decide to permanently lock the basement door, because she used to have this open freely? Why does she refuse to talk about it? Did she also discover the hole? Did she discover something worse than just a hole? Or more disturbingly, did something come out of the hole? In particular, does it use the chute up into the, the closet, the chute from the basement to the closet?
It'd be probably a laundry chute.
That probably is what it is. Most likely, I would imagine. It puts me in mind of, and now I know many of you aren't going to know what I'm speaking of. I was a hardcore fan of the Silent Hill series. And in Silent Hill 4, I remember there was a prison that had like these different floors, and they could rotate. And basically, there was these holes in the floor that you could rotate and line up the holes, and they could get rid of bodies that way, without anybody knowing how they got in and out of the prison. That's what put me in mind of for whatever reason. But how creepy is that, though, right?
Oh, man. Well, I mean, you know, basements by themselves are usually creepy enough without, you know, bizarre pentagram symbols chalked or painted onto the floor. And then to have a hole suddenly just appear, you know, wasn't there yesterday, but I went down this morning and there's a bottomless pit in my basement floor. You know, I mean,
shit, dude, even that's from Silent Hill. You look through this hole in the wall and there's like written in blood or something like that. I was like, there was a hole here once. It's gone now. Or something like that. But there seems to be, like, I mean, several stories. I believe we just covered, I think we just covered one not too long ago from Hunter, with this mansion where the Satanic cult had showed up and did this thing with a, you know, pentagram or whatever. And it seems like where people do this kind of stuff, whatever it is that they do, it don't necessarily leave with them. Do you know what I mean? Like, you know, they go and they do their rituals, they draw their pentagrams or whatever, but it's like they open up a channel or doorway to something that sometimes remains open, right?
Well, I mean, sometimes that's the purpose behind the ritual, is to open up some kind of a doorway and call upon some kind of a being. And, you know, sometimes the people doing the calling aren't looking for something nice. Sometimes, you know, they might be looking for something nice, but because of the nature of this kind of activity, you know, wires get crossed sometimes and stuff sneaks in that shouldn't sneak in, you know. But, you know, of course, when we're dealing with pentagrams, we're assuming that the people involved were looking at calling up something dark. And certainly in this instance, there does seem to be just that. Now, I mean, I don't know if there was ever actually a hole there, or if there is such an entity in this basement, you know, residing in this home. Perhaps it just made him believe that there was a hole there, you know.
Well, to me, the most, I guess, remarkable part of the story is the physical aspect of a hole appearing, right? Obviously, it's not a normal hole if it was, in fact, a hole that appeared there. And, I mean, really, that's the biggest detail of the story. I mean, he makes a point of saying that he saw it on the stairs, and he crept right up to the edge and looked down. He was dropping things into it to check the depth. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, that if the story is true, then, yeah, that's the main part of it to me. So, of all the stories that I've heard, I mean, I'm not going to say I've never heard anything where there was a physical manifestation like that, because, yeah, we've heard stories, but it's not very often that you hear of something physically changing the physical properties of something that we know, right? I mean, the only other story I can think of involving a bottomless hole like that, at least off the top of my head, would be Mel Waters' hole.
Mel's hole, yeah.
Right? I mean, that was an incredible story in itself, but if you remember, like he had dropped, like, and for anybody who doesn't know what I'm speaking about, I'm sure if you know, search this on YouTube, you will find it, and it's an amazing story. I originally heard it from Art Bell
on Coast to Coast AM.
On Coast to Coast AM, and he had this guy, Mel Waters, and he had found this hole. Now, I'm really bad with remembering geography, but Ryan, wasn't that like around Utah?
You know what? I really can't remember. It's been years since I listened to that story.
Yeah, me too. But the crux of the story was he found this hole, and it appeared to be bottomless. And I mean, he had dropped like fishing line with stuff attached to it, I believe, to test if they could reach the bottom. Like, I don't know if it was something with like bubble gum on the bottom, or like a stone with this, or I can't remember exactly what it is, so don't quote me and say this is bullshit, this is what actually happened. I don't believe anything you fucking say, because that's bullshit. Because that happens, right? You start telling a story and it's like, well, I think this happens. Like, what? It wasn't even in that fucking country. Everything you say is bullshit. Like, that happens more often.
We do make mistakes.
Yeah, I mean, this is off the top of my head. This was not the story. This is just a random,
Yeah, there's no script.
There's no script. So, anyway, he had done these things to try and reach the bottom, and I believe, like, they had, like, unloaded, like, kilometers worth of fishing line, and there was no bottom. I mean, they ended up lowering, I don't know if it was a sheep.
Yeah, sheep.
A sheep into it. And, like, it freaked out. I think it came up dead, didn't it?
Yeah, it like, freaked out, made a bunch of noise after it got so far down, and then it went quiet. And they left it there for a bit, and then they pulled it up, and then the story takes a bizarre turn.
Oh, yeah, that's when they start getting this weird fucking creature coming out of it.
Yeah, it splits open, and this weird creature crawls out of it. So like, okay... when we're talking about the paranormal, and especially things that are connected with, powerful forces of darkness, I'm not, anything is definitely possible, right? But one thing that is a prevailing theme throughout all of the lore about, the darkness, the dark forces that exist beyond the material world, is one of deception, right? We get all these monikers for the devil, like the Prince of Lies, the King of Lies, the Lord of Deception, all this kinds of stuff. And, even in the popular culture, when we look at many demon possession movies, it seems that illusion plays a big part in it. The demon makes somebody think that, they're thirsty, and no matter how much they try to drink, they can't drink anything, when in reality they're just like panicking and like drowning themselves because, they have this illusion wrapped around their mind that they somehow are incapable of drinking anything, and they're dying of thirst.
Was that on Constantine?
Yeah, I think you're right. That guy who was like an alcoholic or something ended up drowning himself in booze in a liquor store. Not a bad way to go.
So that,
but
yeah, I can think of worse ways.
I guess what I'm getting at is that, I at least address the idea that, there may not have been a physical hole, that if this is a being of darkness and it's following some of these old tripes that evil dark entities seem to follow from time to time, then perhaps this was an image manifested by the being, either to say, probably to cause terror, but to I don't know. There seems to always be a quality of almost like, they're planting little clues, planting little, like, you'll learn the truth of what you're dealing with here if you really pay attention. In a deep black hole in the middle of a pentagram, definitely conjures some very specific images,
So you think it's more of a symbolic idea? Like it could be trying to convey a message, rather, like he's seeing it, but it's not really there, and it's more of a message.
Yeah, like he believes totally that it's there, and he believes he's picking up pennies and pebbles and drop. I'm just saying this is a possibility, because whenever I think about an entity, coming here from another universe, essentially, another dimension, if you want to say it that way. I always think of things in terms of energy. Okay, if this entity is able to manipulate certain physical properties, even if it can manipulate anything and everything it wants, there's still, most likely an energy involved, and they have to, recharge themselves or find a source that they can drain energy from or gain energy from. So, when I'm looking at or thinking about things like this, I think if I was a evil, dark entity with a limited amount of energy, and I wanted to convey a message, whether that was just one of abject terror or something with a deeper symbolic meaning, would I bother creating an actual, seemingly kilometers deep, bottomless pit, or would I create the illusion of one? What would be more energy efficient?
Well, to reinforce your notion of it being energy, there's a very important aspect to a lot of sightings that people see involving, I guess if you want to call it demonic activity or just paranormal in general, and that is that you could have 3 or 4 people in a room and only one person could be viewing something abnormal, but they're clearly watching it. Like, they're in the rooms like, what? You guys can't see that. And they're staring at it, and they're panicked, and they're horrified, and nobody else can see it. So are we going to sit back and concede that that person was crazy when it's something that happened to so many people? Or are we going to, believe that the idea that whatever this is can actually target somebody?
And then you get, did you catch on the camera? And he's like, no, the batteries mysteriously died.
Yeah, right. So
and I'm feeling tired all of a sudden, stuff like that.
Energy draining. Well, yeah, and that's true too. I mean, you go to any paranormal, that's a hallmark of the paranormal is that it drains energy, specifically from batteries, because people always have video cameras and cameras at paranormal sites because they're hoping to capture something, and that is well, geez, just look at the movies, right? All that's based on real stories too. And what happens every time you get into a room that's got activity going? Well, the lights flicker, the power goes out. And that's not just a horror movie cliche, because there's a bit of truth to all of that stuff, and it comes back to real stories that are reported. In fact, there's a thing, I really hope that we get to cover this someday, but the concept of sliders. And I only heard this term from other people, but I have experienced this where you walk under a power light, like a street light, and the second you get underneath it, it goes out. And I know that today we're going to say, okay, well, we have street lights that are motion censored and
timed,
shit like that,
on timers and shit. Yeah.
Right. But this stuff happened when I was a kid, way before there was stuff like that. And lots of people got stories like that. There's people with stories. I believe we did one. I can't remember who it was and what a story was, but I remember they had been fooling around with a Ouija board, and I believe he said on his way home when he was driving, all the street lights started going out as he passed them, right? So,
we've even experienced the battery draining thing when you were here visiting, and we went on that ghost tour.
Right.
That entire, I brought a pocket full of batteries, and they were the right kind of batteries, because I know there are right and wrong batteries for digital cameras. And I bought a whole very expensive pack of them, and by the time the night was out, I'd gone through every single battery.
Yep. So it is a fact, right? Anybody who has dealt with the paranormal knows that power, or I should say power draining of some kind is a form of fuel for whatever it is that you're dealing with, and it doesn't even have to be power as we know it, like electricity. Sometimes it feeds on people, particularly emotions. So it's another reason why dark entities would want you to be down and otherwise have negative energy, because negative entities actually feed on that like a fuel source.
See, I always find it very interesting whenever we get one of these stories where a ritual like this has been performed in an area within a home that is you know, at least, you know, at that time of the telling of the story is also notoriously haunted. You know, and it makes me wonder if, because I mean, let's face it, throughout history, there's been a lot of people, teenagers mostly, who've drawn pentagrams and lit candles, and I mean, I've done it, and you know, without calling up something for real, you know. Now, is it possible that, you know, because this is not like you said, it's not the first time we've had a story kind of like this, where some kind of, you know, it seemed anyway that some kind of dark ritual had been performed in a house that also has a history of haunting. That, you know, there might be some kind of symbiotic nature between the, you know, the kind of state that a certain place has to be in order to be a high haunting zone. And then, you know, does that make it easier to get in contact with the dark side? Does that, you know, is the area essentially charged already?
I think there's truth to the idea how, you know, how people talk about ley lines, right? And places of power are strategically placed
on the convergence of different ley lines. Yeah,
exactly. So I think there's truth to that. Just like there are certain areas, believe it or not, there's a lot of, and I know you know this, but there's a lot of places where, you know, they have their own story of, oh, this is the gateway to hell here. This is the portal to hell. And it's not like there's like one state or one country or something like that has these stories. You know, they're found all throughout the world in different cultures where this is. And I think the idea being that, I guess if we were to look at reality as a material that, you know, encircles our world, if you want to look at it like that, just like we have a magnetosphere and we have you know what I mean? Like we have these different layers of things. And if you were to look at the magnetosphere, like if you look at examples of it, you'll find that it's not all even. You know, there's holes in it.
There's holes in it. There's areas of higher concentration. Certainly,
exactly. It's flawed, just like everything else from real life, right? So I think you'd find the same thing with, if whatever you want to call the layer that's between this reality and that reality, or this dimension and that dimension, and in certain areas, I believe it's thin.
There's a thinning of the veil.
A thinning or a hole even, right? Where it's, I mean, do you think it's an accident that so many people who practice this stuff, they have specific places that they do it? For example, and I know this is an entirely other topic, but if we were to look at what happens at Bohemian Grove, right, amongst all the politicians and the world's most powerful and elite, the rituals that go on there. I mean, do you think... Allegedly. Do you think that they picked that location purely out of convenience, that they could be away from everybody, or do you think there's...
certainly there's some sort of Messianic or Bavarian significance to the, you know, the longitude and latitude, or
right, there's
some kind of significance to that location. I mean, the same goes for all kinds of ritualistic sites all over the world. You know, whether it's the pyramids or the Aztec ziggurats or Stonehenge or any other, you know, standing stone area. There does seem to be very precise, very particular alignments amongst some of these sites.
Exactly. It's never a case of, okay, we're going to go for a walk, and wherever we find a nice isolated place away from people, that's the spot we're going to pick. That's not the only concern. There's more to it than that. It's just like some people used to use divining rods to find water. And actually people use that for ghosts too, right? Yep. And essentially they
pendulums.
Pendulums. You know, in the case of divining rods, they hold on to these two metallic rods, and they will actually pull and point towards where the water is supposed to be. But I mean,
don't they cross one another? If
they do. Water? They do. They cross, and you follow. You know, you follow the way that they cross and point. And that's something I've actually seen. I remember particularly in one episode on, I think it was, I don't know if it was paranormal, no, A Haunting, the show A Haunting, and there was a story like that where this teenager and his mother was a paranormal investigator, and she went with a couple of people in this graveyard, and she took her son, and her son was using these divining rods, and anyway, he ended up getting possessed, I think. But that's what they used. That's what he was using to find this thing. So, yeah, I mean, energy. That's another aspect. Actually, I'm fucking all over the place. I realize that, but that's another aspect. When it comes to divining and people using these different tools to find or answer questions.
Which again may be somehow connected to ley lines, or obviously these kinds of things, they've been studied by different intellectuals throughout centuries. But it's one of those things that you'll never find in a peer-reviewed scientific journal. So it's difficult to pin down.
Well, the irony is that there probably exists somewhere actual scientific proof from a fringe science team that would never for their life, probably a top secret. It could be government or
that's
privately
why I said
owned
peer-reviewed paper, because I'm sure
right,
there's lots of experiments that have been performed that by legitimate scientists, legitimately trying to answer questions about, because scientists try to learn about the world, whether it's the world of the seen or the world of the unseen. And there are quite a few of them that are interested in things like UFOs and ghosts and portals and other dimensions and other dimensional beings and this kind of thing. But, make no mistake, that's professional suicide to pursue that kind of a... So, there may in fact be research papers that have, definitive test results of experiments performed over years, but they'll never send them to be peer reviewed. Like that would just be professional suicide.
I think even more so than just professional suicide, it could be literal suicide.
Yeah, you get suicided.
Yeah, you basically, we've heard stories of people they basically had a gun that the bullet was like ice with a toxic chemical inside the ice that would melt inside the body. After you shoot somebody with it, the chemical would cause them to have a heart attack, and as it would melt, the chemical was untraceable, and the ice would melt, and there was like no real proof that anything had, anything sinister had happened to the person.
The most insidious one that I've heard about, and I can't verify the truthfulness of this, but it seems like something that they would have, that certain alphabet agencies, perhaps ones like the CIA, I'm not saying that they use it specifically, but perhaps an agency like the CIA would have a type of gun that can produce a short burst of very intense radiation, and certain forms of very exotic cancers have been attributed to, UFO investigators and people trying to uncover conspiracies and this kind of thing. I don't know if I've ever heard one about, a parapsychologist getting bumped off, but I really would not be surprised.
Well, it's like this. I know that Ryan and I have never actually publicly said this, because we're huge buffs on conspiracies. We read that stuff up all the time. We've been fans of that stuff for years, and you'll notice we don't cover it. If you actually go back to our first podcasts, you'll see in the intro there was an actual little slide there that said conspiracies. It had like paranormal, had UFOs, conspiracies, and we've never really covered conspiracies. There's a good reason for that. It's not that we don't find it interesting.
It's because we're terrified.
Stations and channels that have done that have actually been shut down. They have actually been threatened. Nobody's really coming and knocking on your door with the paranormal because there's really no evidence that you can say, hey, look, this is it. This is going to get everybody up into an uproar. But when it comes to conspiracies, the conspiracy comes from evidence that's somehow leaked, right?
Yeah.
It's a document somewhere. It's a picture somewhere. It's a something or other. And like, I love that stuff, but I'm not ever putting my ass on the line for it, right? If the Men in Black come and talk to me and tell me to shut up, I'm shutting up. And I really don't care. I know people are like, oh, you gotta let the people know, blah blah blah. I was like, no, not when my ass is on the line. I'm not claiming to be a hero, I really would shut up about it. So we stick to the paranormal,
UFOs, the stuff that people don't typically get suicided over.
Exactly. So getting back to the story that, and I realized we went a little off topic again. It's kind of our thing, but Xander's story. One thing that I'm left very curious about is
why did Grandma start locking the door?
Why did Grandma lock the door? And did she realize that the chute could get from the basement to the closet anyway, rendering it a moot point? Maybe there was something down there that she saw, literally, just like how the little kid saw the hole in the floor. Maybe she saw something literal, and she was afraid that a guest could see it or could find its. I don't know. I really don't know.
Well, maybe she saw something crawl out of the hole. Although in that instance, I'd perform a pretty immediate GTFO maneuver. A tactical retreat up the stairs, out the door, and never in that house again.
Maybe there was tunnels going all under it, like Pickman's model.
Yeah, there you go. There's literally 1,000 reasons why she could have locked the door, but suffice to say that since she locked that specific door after not having it locked for years, I think it's pretty safe to say that she did have some kind of experience that unnerved her. And I mean, it's human nature. If you were in a situation where you were just standing up in your bedroom and you looked out through your door and you seen something walk through the wall of your hallway door, turn and look at you and bare its fangs and its eyes start glowing red, you wouldn't stand there with the fucking door open. You would close your door. You'd be like, God damn it, I'm closing this door. There's a demon in my hallway. Now, you just watched it walk through a wall, but you would still close that door regardless, because there's, on some level, that checked off a little box in in your mind. It was like, okay, we've established a safe perimeter. It's not, but these are the kinds of things that we do as people, the kind of, the mental gymnastics that we perform.
The OCD little things we do. Like, for example, I don't know about you, but I can't sleep on my bed and have any of my limbs over the side of the bed, because if my limb is over the side of the bed, I'm vulnerable to whatever's under my bed.
I solved that problem years ago. I just have like a giant stack of mattresses directly on the floor, so no under the bed.
I still can't do it. I can't have any, like, the only thing that can be exposed of me when I'm sleeping, unless it's really hot, is just my head. Yeah. I need to be completely under and like cocooned in my blanket.
Yeah, no, that's not a problem for me. I don't know. Maybe it's because I'm already swimming with evil.
I thought you were going to say swimming in sweat.
Swimming in sweat.
I'm already swimming in body butter. I can't.
Already swimming in demons, apparently.
Well, that is the thing that we say. I always imagined that you had a Dybbuk in your beard.
That's always possible.
Well, if that ever happens, Ryan, I believe we should have a story, especially if it could speak on your behalf a little bit. We could have a little bit of going back and forth. We'll have a little bit of "fuck off" coming out of your beard. It'd be kind of like Tourette's, but
a third member of the podcast. Yeah,
a third member of the podcast.
Well, I mean, there are certain mental gymnastics that we perform to make ourselves feel better, like these little coping mechanisms that, I mean, it's like the act of locking your door before you go to bed, right? You do it, in the hope that it's going to thwart somebody who's going to try and steal from you or kill you. Now, if somebody wants to steal from you and they can't get in through the door and there's no open windows and they'd have to make a lot of noise, yeah, maybe they would fuck off and go somewhere else. But if somebody really wants to kill you, there's no lock that's going to stop them. There's no window that's going to stop them. If they really want to kill you, they'll come through the fucking wall and you're done. Right? I mean...
Well, they don't even have to do that. I don't know if anybody's...
Burn the damn place down around your ears. So
there are... Sorry, go on.
Well, what I was going to say was that, it's part of these mental gymnastics that we perform to make ourselves feel better. So, I mean, Grandma could very well know that there's a chute in her closet, or in the closet of that room. Was it her closet or just a closet of a room?
I believe it was just a closet of a room upstairs.
So, and who knows, maybe she locks her bedroom door and locks that bedroom door before she goes to bed every night. I mean, I'm just, I just wanted to point out that, we as humans and our weird ways that we get along in our day-to-day lives, we'll find ways to live in a situation. Maybe she doesn't have the means to actually leave, so she just has to do what she feels that she can do in order to make the situation livable.
Well, people do. They do deal, especially with paranormal places. I mean, let's face it. If you buy a house, that's a big commitment, and even if it's haunted as fuck, it doesn't mean that you can just move out. It's never that simple.
I'm sorry, bank. I have to default on my mortgage because of ghosts. And the bank is like going to say, "Oh, ghosts. Well, geez, come over and stay with me tonight. We'll do the bank stuff in the morning." That's not the answer you're getting from the bank.
No, and if you watch, and I have watched when I had free time. Once upon a time, I watched a ton of all the paranormal shows that you can think of, and Unsolved Mysteries being one of my favorite. And one thing that was prevalent in a lot of episodes and stories was that people who live in haunted houses, that is the predicament that they were often in, is that it's haunted, we know it's haunted, but we have no money. We just sank all of our money into this new home. We can't move. We got it at an unusually low price. Yeah. I mean, let's face it. Things that seem too good to be true almost always are, right? So, in a lot of these cases, they'd find bones in the yard. And then they had to get a priest or some person that knew something to come up and do a ritual, put the bones at rest. And now the spirits are happy. It's common enough that it's almost textbook. There should be a textbook you can go to get, and it's is your house haunted, and have a checklist of things and things you could do, a how-to troubleshoot guide. Your house is haunted. Well, did you check this? Like computers, right? Was it plugged in? Did you press Alt Control Delete? Did you? But it almost should be for that. Because it just seems so common, not to make it too general, but when it comes to hauntings and the paranormal, and maybe the reason we don't cover a whole lot of these stories is that if you're looking up the paranormal, I'd say a good half of the stories are like that. My house is haunted, things are moved, and I don't know where they move, and I hear disembodied voices, and...
I'd be so interested to see some kind of official statistic on that. I don't know, some kind of a state poll or provincial poll or country-wide poll, and say, I don't know, 35% of Americans feel that they live in a place that is haunted. I'd love to see the numbers.
Yeah, me too. I do believe there are, there's always websites that try to collect this stuff, but as you and I know, just from having this podcast, is that a lot of people, believe it or not, there's a lot of people that want to tell their stories specifically to us, but not in a public setting, because
they don't want to submit a story. They don't want to do a podcast.
They just want to know what somebody who deals with this stuff thinks, and I'm happy to oblige with that. But it just goes to show that I think a lot of cases are unreported, and I can see why. I mean, you could be ostracized from the community, from your peers, from your coworkers.
Well, especially if you're some kind of, mid to high level professional. Even if you're just a respected member of the community who's, a business owner, you could really do a lot of personal damage to yourself because, it's one of those areas where people are, what's the term they use in the UFO arena? The topic is self-polices, right? Because we've turned it into such a taboo as a society to talk about. When somebody brings it up, they're immediately socially ostracized and, may even be professionally and financially hurt by the fact that they've associated themselves with this topic that is supposed to be taboo and off limits, and
I don't think that's an accident.
No, not at all.
I honestly believe that there are groups that sat down that knew there's something to this and made it a point of saying that, we're going to put out Hollywood movies and this and that and this book and that book, and we're going to make it fictional.
So it's been socially engineered.
It's been socially engineered. And especially with aliens. I mean, how better to do that? Okay, well, we know there's aliens. We've recovered craft. We've recovered different debris and technology, LED lights, computer chips, whatever. And fiber optics. We know it's real, but we don't want anybody to know about that because if they believe in aliens and the sky is falling and people go into a panic, so what do? Well, let's make a bunch of Hollywood movies, so it's fiction, and anybody who believes in that shit, well, we got a group of people that are going to go out there and, totally ostracize, totally make fun. We're going to make magazines, make fun of these people, and now that will be the accepted norm. I don't think people realize just how big an influence TV and media has had and does have over society in general. And I think the internet is actually the biggest threat to that. I honestly think that because the internet used to be government control. I mean, like they had it within government, and scientists and stuff would use email to communicate back and forth.
Yeah, it started out as a military application.
Right, and then it got out to the public, and I think that's the thing that they regret most. I honestly do, because now all of a sudden, I mean, how many people, I know people, I'm one of them to a degree, how many people just use the internet and don't really fuck with TV anymore? You watch YouTube, you listen to podcasts and this and that, you got websites that you go to where people are discussing these very same issues, stuff that you never get on mainstream TV, and all of a sudden, you have all these different cultures and people and from all different walks of life, all different areas of the world, comparing notes. And now we're starting to see things that all of a sudden isn't so taboo, is more common than we thought. We know have been hidden. We know have been, falsified on a media level and stuff like that.
I know that we have gone so far off topic, it's not even funny, but I just, since we're already kind of into this already, I will say that I'm very much of the opinion, and this is 100% my opinion now, that it, the trick, at least for the UFO thing, goes so much deeper, to the degree that they, TV and media and all that shit has got us all looking up in the sky for this stuff, right? And rightfully so. This is where we see these strange craft, and we see them all the damn time, all over the world. And we see it so much that, personally, I'm kind of a science nerd, and I started to ask the question, well, Jesus, what's so interesting that they'd have to be around so much? That, and I have read some statements by certain people, and this will have to be something that we do in a later podcast, but I really believe that the whole extraterrestrial phenomenon, the whole UFO phenomenon, that the majority, if not all of it, I do believe that aliens exist in the universe, but I believe that what we refer to as the UFO phenomenon is something being perpetrated by another branch of the human race, a branch of humanity that we split off from long time ago, who basically they got further ahead and smarter than us faster, and nowadays they use advanced technology to hide in deep underground facilities. And as not so much hide is they exist in these, like deep underground, as far as we know. The conditions stay the same for hundreds of thousands and millions of years. The temperature doesn't change. The situation just stays the same down there as long as you aren't in a very geologically active area. So if you had the technology and the ability to live down there comfortably and entertain yourself and live your life without any ill effect, well, why would you live on the surface? I mean, it's dangerous up here. There's storms and floods and volcanoes and comets and, meteorites and all kinds of, space phenomenon that could do damage to people here on the surface. So, they're in the last few years, I'm after seeing a lot of stuff about, another branch of humanity, and I've seen them referred to as the tall heads or the tall skulls.
The cone heads, right?
Well, no, they're not cone heads, but not far off. That they have, basically these cultures around the world that participate in head binding. And where they bind the heads of their children in leather cords to literally elongate and shape the skull into these very specific forms, are doing so to mimic, our ancient overlords. And that, the claim is that these beings are who some people refer to as the Anunnaki or the Viracocha or, whatever. But they're we would consider them almost emotionless, very intelligent race of they're not Homo sapiens, but they're pretty close, and they're the ones who operate this stuff. So the popular media is, if that's true, and they're the true rulers of things, then make everybody think they're from outer space. Nobody would think to look in a cave for you, right?
That's true. And then we have the whole reptilian idea.
Exactly. And
right?
That's the tie-in there, too, is that the stories have been circulating for the last few decades now, pretty much ever since David Icke, about the reptilian overlords. And, but, of course, this is a topic for a completely different podcast.
And we are doing it because that is the custom podcast we got coming for the eccentric donator.
So, and I guess consider this a little bit of a flavor, a little taste before that podcast comes out, because that's at least the direction that my mind goes in this area of this topic, right?
Oh, for sure. So, in essence, and yes, we really did get very far off topic, but I'm just going to put it out there. People like when we do longer podcasts, and every story we get isn't going to fill a whole hour. So we do what we can to give you some meat to listen to. And we don't want to tell anybody not to submit because, hey, your story's going to take 10 or 15 minutes to get through. If you took the time to write it, then,
we're going to do our best to do a podcast on it.
We're going to do our best to do a podcast on it, and if that means that we just go off topic into anything that's discussion, I mean, let's just face it. It's a conversation. That's what our show is and always was. We sit down and we talk like two friends, like we did before we had a show, right? We're on the phone. That's how discussions go. You don't really have an aim to where you're going to end up. They just go where they go. You
just follow the thread as it naturally evolves. So, well, that's
exactly
where it took us today, and I feel that we've covered the majority of the aspects of the story. And I think it's a short story, but I think it's a great one.
Well, exactly, and that's
it led to some colorful conversation.
When I think of my own stories, which are very lame compared to the ones that people send in to me, that's the thing about it. Even though they're small and everybody else would look at them and say, man, that's a shitty story. There's really not much to it. Because I know that the stuff that happened to me really isn't that big a deal. But to me, it felt like a big deal, right? Because it was something notable. It was something I felt. I mean, that's the thing that you can't always put into words, is to try to capture that feeling you get when you experience something like this.
Conveying the significance is not always easy, nor is it always relative to the length of your tale.
Exactly. So, I guess what I'm trying to say is that it really doesn't matter to me how long or short your story is. If it's important to you, then it has merit, and it's a story that I would like to try and get out there. I mean, that's why people tell their stories. They're looking for, sometimes it's who else experienced similar events to this. They're looking for feedback. What can you tell me about what I experienced? What can you do to help me make sense of what happened to me?
We're all individuals in this world, and life came with no manual, and sometimes crazy, weird shit happens that we as humans have to find a common human experience with,
and who are you going to call?
Exactly. there's sometimes there's nowhere else for you. If there's no one within your circle who's seen a UFO or had been abducted or has experienced possession firsthand, then you need to reach out to a greater community, extend your circle of peers. And, that's why I'm so glad when people join us around this, our digital campfire, and join us for our conversation and add their stories and their voices. It's one of the most beautiful things about the internet, I think.
That's my favorite part of it. As a fan of the paranormal and of stories like this, and it's so awesome to get everybody else's stories, stories I haven't heard before, because, the most popular stories, they're already out there. They already exist. But what about little Tom, Dick, Sally, and Harry, right? I know I realized it's like Third Rock from the Sun, but...
well, that's where they got the names.
Exactly. But what about, those people? I mean, we've had people who've told us this is the first time they've ever told anybody their story. And that's awesome, is to hear something that nobody's heard before, and to be able to put that out there for everybody else to hear for the first time. That's just really, really cool. It's just trying to, getting something new in a world where, I mean, let's face it, the paranormal's niche. There's not tons of stuff out there. But there should be, because there's lots of stories happening. So we do try to encourage people to submit their stories. And, we've got a lot of people's stories there, so you're not alone, right? And so with that having been said, we do have more podcasts coming and new stuff coming soon. But, I hope you enjoyed the episode, regardless of how random, I guess, it seems to have trailed. But it's always a fun conversation, at least from my perspective. So hopefully you enjoyed that. You can offer your thoughts there. And stay tuned for our new episodes on the way.
Thanks for listening, everybody. Have a great night.
I was waiting for that.
Yeah, sorry.
Good night, everybody.
I had a mouthful of smoke, and I
he didn't want to say goodbye. He's just going to miss everybody so much.
Yeah, there you go.
All right.
Just cut all the rest of that stuff out.
I'm not going to do it. I'm going to leave it in. All right. Good night, everybody.
Good night. Fuck. I inhaled and I started to fucking choke on it, and I muted my mic and started coughing. Oh, fuck, I gotta quit smoking.